The music festival was an annual ritual for us, a tradition that Maria and I held dear to our hearts. Each year, as summer faded into autumn, we would pack our bags, leave the worries of everyday life behind, and immerse ourselves in a world where the only language spoken was music. It was a place where we felt most alive, where every note seemed to echo the rhythm of our love. As we walked through the festival grounds, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel a surge of contentment. The air was filled with the hum of anticipation, the scent of fresh grass mingling with the distant aroma of food trucks, and the vibrant chatter of fellow festival goers. The stage, with its grand arches and glittering lights, loomed ahead like a beacon, promising an evening of unforgettable performances. Maria's eyes sparkled with excitement, her smile as radiant as the golden sun setting behind the horizon. She squeezed my hand, her grip warm and reassuring, a silent reminder of the bond we shared. I looked at her, my heart swelling with affection. And for a moment, everything felt perfect. The world was a symphony, and we were dancing to its melody. We had been coming to this festival for years, and each time, it felt like a renewal of our vows, a celebration of our life together. The music had always been our common ground, the one thing that could pull us out of our daily routines and remind us of the beauty in the world. Whether it was the soulful strum of a guitar, the melancholic wail of a saxophone, or the powerful beat of drums, every sound resonated with us, deepening our connection. The crowd around us was a sea of faces, each one lost in their world of sound and emotion. Yet, in that vast ocean of humanity, Maria and I had always found our little island, a place where we could be alone together, even in the midst of thousands. We would sway to the music, whispering sweet nothings into each other's ears, our hearts beating in time with the rhythm of the songs. Tonight was no different. As we found our spot in front of the main stage, I wrapped my arm around Maria's waist, pulling her close. The first notes of the evening's performance filled the air, and I felt her lean into me, her head resting on my shoulder. There was a comfort in the familiarity of it all, a sense of belonging that only music and love could bring. I closed my eyes, letting the music wash over me, and for a brief moment, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. Maria was beside me, the night was young, and the music was just beginning. Little did I know that this harmony, this perfect symphony of our lives, was about to encounter a dissonant note that would change everything. As the night deepened, the festival reached its peak. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, the anticipation almost tangible in the air. The lights dimmed, casting a soft glow over the stage, and a hush fell over the audience. It was the moment we had all been waiting for, the headline act. I felt Maria's hand tighten around mine as the first performer of the night was announced. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Jessica Larson." The name was unfamiliar to me, but the way it rolled off the announcer's tongue hinted at something special. There was a ripple of applause, polite at first, then growing in intensity as a figure stepped into the spotlight. Jessica was not what I expected. She was striking, yet understated, with an air of quiet confidence that commanded attention. Dressed in a simple black gown, her presence was elegant, almost ethereal. As she approached the grand piano that stood center stage, the crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath, waiting to see what this unassuming artist would bring. And then, she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, but they quickly gave way to a cascade of sound that filled the night air with a powerful, haunting melody. Jessica's fingers moved across the keys with grace and precision that were mesmerizing, each note perfectly placed, each chord resonating with an emotional depth that was impossible to ignore. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the music enveloped us, pulling me into its embrace. It was as if the piano itself was alive, speaking directly to each of us in the audience, telling stories of love, loss, and longing with every note. The world around us seemed to fade away, leaving only the music and the woman who was conjuring it from the depths of her soul. I glanced at Maria, curious to see her reaction, and what I saw took me by surprise. Her eyes were fixed on Jessica, wide and unblinking, her expression one of utter rapture. She was completely captivated, lost in the music in a way I had never seen before. There was a light in her eyes, a spark of something new and intense, as if Jessica's performance had unlocked a part of her that had been dormant until now. I watched as Maria's lips parted slightly, her breath catching in her throat. She was transfixed, every fiber of her being attuned to the music, to the woman at the piano. I could almost feel the energy between them, a silent connection forged in the space of a few notes. As Jessica continued to play, her hands dancing across the keys with effortless skill, I found myself torn between the beauty of the music and the strange, almost magnetic pull it seemed to have on Maria. I had seen her moved by music before, but this was different. There was an intensity in her gaze, a focus that bordered on obsession. The performance built to its crescendo, the music swelling to a heart-wrenching climax before slowly fading into a delicate, lingering finish. When the last note finally echoed into the night, the audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that shook the very ground beneath us. But Maria remained still, her eyes locked on Jessica as the pianist rose and took a modest bow. As the applause continued, Jessica looked out into the crowd, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes seemed to meet Maria's. There was a brief, almost imperceptible smile on her lips, a gesture that felt personal as if it was meant for Maria alone. I turned to Maria, hoping to share in the afterglow of the performance, but she was still staring at the stage, her expression unreadable. The connection between them, whatever it was, lingered in the air like a phantom, haunting and unresolved. I squeezed her hand, pulling her back to the present, but the spell had been cast. And in that moment, I felt a subtle shift in the world we had known, as if something had changed between us, even if neither of us could fully comprehend it yet. The final note of Jessica's performance still lingered in the air as the crowd began to disperse, voices rising in animated chatter about the mesmerizing pianist they had just witnessed. But Maria was unusually quiet, her eyes distant, as if she were still entranced by the music that had captivated her so completely. As we made our way through the throng of people, I could tell that something was different. Maria's usual excitement after a performance was replaced by a quiet intensity. She wasn't just impressed, she was drawn in as if Jessica's music had awakened something deep within her. "John," Maria said suddenly, her voice breaking through my thoughts. "I need to meet her." I blinked, slightly taken aback. "You mean Jessica?" She nodded, her eyes now filled with a determination that left little room for doubt. I need to tell her how much her music meant to me." It was like nothing I've ever felt before. There was a fervor in her tone that I hadn't heard before. It wasn't just admiration, it was something more. Something that I couldn't quite place but felt in the pit of my stomach. "All right," I agreed, trying to keep my voice light. "Let's see if we can catch her." We navigated our way backstage, where artists and crew mingled in the afterglow of the show. Maria moved with purpose, her usual shyness replaced by a boldness that surprised me. I followed closely, not entirely sure what we would find. We turned a corner and there she was, Jessica. The woman who had just held an entire audience spellbound, now stood alone, a small smile playing on her lips as she gently closed the lid of the piano. She looked up as we approached, her eyes locking onto Maria with an almost knowing expression. "Excuse me, Jessica?" Maria's voice was soft but steady. Jessica turned fully towards us, her smile widening. "Yes? How can I help you?" "I just wanted to say," Maria began, her words tumbling out as if she had rehearsed them in her head 100 times. "Your performance tonight was extraordinary. I've never heard anything like it. The way you played, it felt like you were telling a story that I've been waiting to hear my entire life." Jessica's smile softened, her eyes never leaving Maria's. "Thank you. That means a lot to me, truly. Music is a very personal thing for me, so to hear that it resonated with you, it's why I do what I do." There was a moment of silence, not awkward but charged with something unspoken. I watched as the two of them stood there as if the world around them had ceased to exist. "Would you like to sit down?" Jessica offered, gesturing to a nearby bench. "I'd love to hear more about what you felt." Maria nodded eagerly, and the two of them moved towards the bench, sitting side by side. I lingered a few steps behind, not wanting to intrude but unable to pull myself away. I could see the connection forming between them, an invisible thread that seemed to draw them closer with every word exchange. As they talked, Jessica's face lit up with genuine interest, and Maria opened up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She spoke passionately about the music, her hands gesturing animatedly, her eyes bright. Jessica listened intently, nodding and occasionally interjecting with insights of her own, their conversation flowing effortlessly as if they had known each other for much longer than just a few minutes. I stood there, watching the two of them, feeling an odd mix of emotions. On one hand, I was happy to see Maria so alive, so engaged. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between us. Something I couldn't quite name but could sense in the way Maria's focus was entirely on Jessica. As their conversation continued, I realized that this was more than just a meeting of two music lovers. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, something electric and immediate. It wasn't just the music that had drawn Maria to Jessica, it was Jessica herself. And in that moment, as I watched them laugh and talk as if the rest of the world had faded away, I knew that this was the beginning of something that would change everything. The spell that Jessica had cast during her performance had only deepened, and now it was more than just a shared love of music. It was a connection, a bond that I could see growing stronger with every passing minute. And though I stood just a few feet away, I felt more distant from Maria than I ever had before. It didn't take long for Maria and Jessica's connection to blossom into a full-fledged friendship. What began as casual conversations after the festival soon evolved into frequent meetups. At first, it was coffee dates and long walks, discussions about music and life. But as the weeks passed, their time together grew more frequent, and I began to notice subtle shifts in our daily routine. Maria had always been someone who cherished her alone time, content to spend evenings curled up with a book or practicing her music at the piano. But now, her free hours seemed to revolve around Jessica. It wasn't unusual for her to mention that she was meeting up with her new friend, and soon it became almost a daily occurrence. At first, I was glad Maria had found someone who shared her deep passion for music. It was something she'd been missing, a friend who understood that side of her, someone who could engage in the kind of artistic discussions that had always animated her. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to feel a strange disquiet, a nagging sensation that something was slipping away. Maria's enthusiasm for these meetups was palpable. She would come home after spending time with Jessica, her face flushed with excitement, her eyes bright as she recounted their conversations. She spoke of Jessica with admiration, often telling me about her new compositions or the ideas they had exchanged. There was a liveliness in Maria that I hadn't seen in a long time, a spark that reminded me of when we first fell in love. Yet, with every retelling of her time with Jessica, I couldn't help but notice the growing distance between us. It was as if Maria was drawing closer to someone else. Even as she shared the details of their friendship with me, she was physically present, but there was a part of her, somewhere deep within, that seemed increasingly occupied by thoughts of Jessica. Even when we were together, there was a new kind of quiet between us. Our conversations, once easy and filled with shared experiences, now felt slightly stilted, as if we were both aware of a shift that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Maria would mention Jessica's name in passing, a soft smile playing on her lips. And I would listen, nodding along, trying to ignore the pang of something that felt dangerously close to jealousy. The changes were small at first. Maria would come home later than usual or cancel plans we'd made because Jessica had invited her somewhere. She'd disappear into her world when they were together, and I could see that Jessica had become more than just a friend. She was a source of inspiration, of joy, of something that I couldn't quite compete with. It wasn't just the time they spent together. It was the way Maria spoke about her, the way her eyes would light up at the mention of Jessica's name. There was an intimacy growing between them, one that seemed to deepen with each passing day. I could sense it in the way Maria would sometimes pause before speaking as if she were considering whether to share something with me or keep it between her and Jessica. I began to feel like a spectator in my marriage, watching from the sidelines as Maria's world expanded to include this new and intriguing presence. And while I tried to be supportive, to be happy that Maria had found someone who made her so animated, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was slowly being overshadowed. There were moments when I wanted to say something, to voice the unease that was growing within me, but I held back. I told myself it was just a phase, that the novelty of the friendship would eventually wear off. But as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't just a fleeting connection. Maria and Jessica were becoming inseparable. Their lives intertwined in a way that left me feeling increasingly like an outsider. The late-night phone calls, the sudden bursts of laughter that I wasn't a part of, the inside jokes that I didn't understand, all of these things piled up, creating a distance between Maria and me that was subtle but undeniable. It was as if the more time she spent with Jessica, the less she needed me, and the more I began to question my place in her life. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that I was reading too much into things. But the reality was there, staring me in the face, Maria was slowly drifting away, and no matter how hard I tried to pull her back, she seemed to be slipping through my fingers, drawn ever closer to the woman who had captivated her so completely. It started with little things, small, almost imperceptible changes in Maria's behavior. She had always been open with me, sharing the details of her day, her thoughts, and her feelings. But recently, she had grown more reserved, more distant. The effortless conversations we once had now felt strained, as if unspoken words were lingering between us. Words she wasn't willing to share. I noticed how often she would trail off in the middle of a sentence, her mind seemingly elsewhere. When I asked her about her day, she'd give me vague responses, her eyes flickering away as if she were hiding something. It wasn't like Maria to keep things from me, and the more it happened, the more I felt a knot of unease forming in my chest. The time she spent with Jessica also began to change. It wasn't just the frequency of their meetings, it was the intensity. Maria would come home later and later, her face flushed, her excuses increasingly flimsy. She'd say they'd lost track of time, or that Jessica had shown her something amazing that she couldn't leave. There was always a reason, always a justification, but something in her tone told me there was more to the story. I started noticing the way she'd check her phone constantly, and how her face would light up when a message from Jessica came through. It wasn't just friendship anymore, it was something deeper, something that made my stomach twist with a feeling I didn't want to name. At night, lying in bed next to her, I'd listen to the quiet rise and fall of her breathing, wondering if she was thinking about Jessica or if her mind was somewhere else entirely. The distance between us felt like a chasm, growing wider with each passing day, and no matter how hard I tried to bridge it, Maria seemed to be slipping further away. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overreacting. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It gnawed at me, a constant undercurrent of anxiety that I couldn't shake. I began to pay more attention, watching for any signs that might confirm my suspicions. And soon enough, they came. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything changed. Maria had gone out to meet Jessica, as usual, leaving me alone at home. I tried to busy myself with chores, but my mind kept drifting back to the uneasy thoughts that had been plaguing me for weeks. I decided to take a walk to clear my head, to try and shake off the growing sense of dread. As I walked, I found myself heading in the direction of the cafe where Maria and Jessica often met. I didn't plan it, it just happened. My feet seemed to carry me there on their own, driven by a need to know, to see for myself what was going on. When I arrived, I spotted them immediately. They were sitting at a table near the back, leaning in close to each other, their heads almost touching as they talked. From where I stood, I could see the intensity in their expressions, the way Maria's hand rested on Jessica's arm, the way Jessica looked at her with a tenderness that sent a chill down my spine. I lingered near the entrance, not wanting to be seen but unable to turn away. My heart was pounding in my chest as I strained to hear their conversation, hoping to catch something that would either confirm or dispel my fears. And then I heard it. Maria's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but the words were unmistakable. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Jessica. You've become so important to me, more than I ever expected." Jessica's response was just as quiet, but her tone was filled with emotion. "I feel the same way, Maria. You mean the world to me. I never thought I'd find someone who understands me like you do." There was a pause, a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. I felt my breath catch in my throat as I watched Jessica reach out and take Maria's hand, holding it gently between her own. "You know," Jessica continued, her voice barely audible, "I think about you all the time. It's like you're a part of me now." Maria's eyes met Jessica's, and at that moment, I saw something that I had been dreading, a look of deep affection, of love. "I feel the same," Maria replied, her voice trembling. "I don't want to lose this, whatever it is between us." My world seemed to stop. The air around me felt heavy, suffocating, as the reality of what I had just heard sank in. This wasn't just a friendship. It was something much more, something that had crossed a line I had never imagined Maria would cross. I stepped back, my mind reeling, the ground beneath me feeling unstable. I had suspected something was going on, but hearing it, and witnessing it was an entirely different experience. The woman I loved, the woman I had shared my life with, was in love with someone else. And it wasn't just anyone, it was Jessica, the woman who had come into our lives so suddenly, so unexpectedly, and had taken Maria's heart with her. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to process the betrayal that was now painfully clear. I felt like a stranger in my own life, watching as everything I thought I knew was torn apart by the words I had just overheard. The days that followed were a blur. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one sharper and more painful than the last. I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions, struggling to keep my head above water as the weight of what I had overheard threatened to pull me under. How could this have happened? How could Maria, the woman I had trusted with my heart, betray me like this? The question spun endlessly in my head, but no answers came. All I could feel was the deep, gnawing pain of betrayal, a wound that seemed to grow deeper with every passing day. I tried to go about my life as if nothing had changed, but everything felt different now. The simplest tasks, making coffee in the morning, going to work, coming home in the evening, were all tainted by the knowledge that Maria was no longer mine. She was slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. At night, when the house was quiet and dark, I would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that conversation over and over in my mind. The words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. I could see Maria's face, the way she looked at Jessica, the way she spoke to her with such tenderness. It was a side of her that I had once known, a side that had once been mine. But now it belonged to someone else. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to make her explain how she could do this to me, to us. But every time I tried to find the words, they caught in my throat, leaving me speechless and helpless. I was paralyzed by the fear of what I might hear if I did confront her. The truth, once spoken, could never be taken back, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. So I kept silent, pretending that everything was fine, even as the distance between us grew wider. I watched as Maria continued to see Jessica, their connection growing stronger, while I remained on the outside, looking in. The loneliness was unbearable, a constant ache that I couldn't escape. But beneath the surface, something else was brewing. The pain of betrayal began to fester, slowly turning into something darker, something more dangerous. Anger, raw and unfiltered, began to replace the sorrow that had once consumed me. How dare she? How dare she betray me, after everything we had been through together? The more I thought about it, the more the anger grew, until it was all I could feel. It burned inside me, a fire that wouldn't be quenched. I knew I had to do something, anything, to regain some sense of control over my life. I couldn't just stand by and watch as Maria slipped further away from me, as Jessica took everything that was mine. And then, slowly, an idea began to take shape in my mind. It was born out of the anger and the hurt, a twisted sense of justice that seemed to offer some semblance of relief. If Maria could betray me so easily, if she could take everything we had built and throw it away, then she deserved to face the consequences of her actions. Music had always been at the heart of our relationship, our shared passion, the thing that had brought us together in the first place. It had been the one constant in our lives, the thing that had always connected us, even when everything else seemed uncertain. And now, it would be the instrument of my revenge. The plan began to form, piece by piece, as I lay awake at night. Fueled by the anger that had taken root in my soul, I would organize a musical event, something grand and unforgettable, something that would draw Maria and Jessica in, just as they had been drawn to each other. But this event wouldn't be just another concert. It would be my stage, my platform to reveal the truth, to expose their betrayal to the world. I would invite Jessica to perform, knowing that Maria wouldn't be able to resist attending. They would come, unsuspecting, thinking it was just another night of music and celebration. But when the time was right, I would step onto that stage and deliver my performance, one that would leave them both reeling. I envisioned the moment over and over in my mind, perfecting every detail. The lights, the music, the audience's attention, all focused on me as I revealed the truth. Maria's face would crumble as the realization hit her, and Jessica would be left standing there, exposed for what she truly was, a thief, a homewrecker. It would be the perfect revenge, a public reckoning that would finally give me the closure I so desperately needed. They had taken everything from me, but at that moment, I would take it all back. And they would have to live with the consequences of their actions, just as I had been forced to live with the pain of their betrayal. The plan was set, and there was no turning back. I would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The thought of it gave me a strange sense of peace, a calm before the storm. I was no longer a victim, no longer helpless. I was in control now, and I would make sure that Maria and Jessica felt every ounce of the pain they had caused me. The stage was set, and soon, the show would begin. The moment I decided to go through with my plan, a strange sense of determination settled over me. The pain and anger that had consumed me were now channeled into a singular focus, creating the perfect event that would serve as the stage for my revenge. I knew that if I wanted this to succeed, every detail had to be flawless. It had to look like just another grand musical event, the kind Maria and I had attended so many times before. No one could suspect a thing, not Maria, not Jessica, and certainly not anyone in our circle of friends. I began by reaching out to some of the best musicians and performers I knew, using every connection I had built over the years. I framed it as a celebration of music, an evening where we could all come together to appreciate the art that had brought so much joy to our lives. My reputation helped me secure some incredible talents, people who were not just performers but artists who could captivate an audience, could make the night unforgettable. Every conversation, every email, every phone call was meticulously crafted. I spoke with excitement, with enthusiasm, masking the true intentions behind my words. No one questioned my motives. After all, I was known for my love of music, and for my passion for bringing people together. This event was just another extension of that, or so they thought. The venue was key. It had to be somewhere grand yet intimate, a place where every note, every word, would resonate deeply. I chose a historic theater in the heart of the city, a place steeped in elegance and tradition. The theater itself was a work of art, with its ornate architecture, velvet curtains, and crystal chandeliers. It was perfect, and I knew it would set the tone for what was to come. I spent hours going over every aspect of the event, the lighting, the sound, the program. I wanted everything to be just right. The performances had to flow seamlessly, each one building up to the climax of the evening. My moment on stage, I left nothing to chance, even overseeing the seating arrangements to ensure that Maria and Jessica would be in the perfect spot to witness it all. But perhaps the most delicate part of the plan was inviting Jessica. I couldn't afford to raise any suspicion, so I had to approach her carefully as if this were just another friendly invitation, something casual and expected. I waited until the timing was right, until Maria had mentioned that Jessica was looking forward to their next meetup, until I knew that Jessica would be in a good mood. Then, I reached out to her directly, something I had rarely done before. "Jessica," I began, my voice light, easy. "I've been working on something special, and I wanted to extend a personal invitation to you. We're organizing a musical event next month, something that's a bit different from the usual festivals. It's going to be an intimate evening with some incredible artists. I think you'd enjoy it." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I wondered if she could sense the underlying tension in my voice. But when she responded, her tone was warm and friendly. "John, that sounds wonderful. I'd love to come. Thank you for thinking of me." "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile I knew she couldn't see. "It wouldn't be the same without you. And I know Maria would be thrilled to have you there as well." "I'm looking forward to it," she said, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. "It sounds like it's going to be an amazing night." "Oh, it will be," I assured her. "It definitely will be." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at my phone, the weight of what I was planning pressing down on me. I had just invited the woman who had come between Maria and me to the very event where I intended to expose her, to shatter the illusion of her perfect friendship with my wife. The irony wasn't lost on me, and a bitter smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Jessica had no idea what was coming. To her, this was just another night out, another chance to immerse herself in the world of music that she loved so much. But to me, it was so much more. It was the night I would reclaim my life, the night I would take back control. As the day of the event drew closer, I threw myself into the final preparations, each task bringing me one step closer to the moment I had been envisioning for weeks. The anger that had driven me at the start was now tempered with a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about closure, about ending this chapter of my life on my terms. I could feel the anticipation building within me, a strange mix of dread and excitement. The stage was set, the players were in place, and soon, the curtain would rise. All that was left was to wait for the night of the show, the night when everything would finally come to light. The day of the show arrived with a sense of inevitability, as if every moment of my life had been leading to this. I woke up early, feeling a strange calm wash over me. The anger that had fueled my every action for weeks was now tucked away, replaced by a steely determination to see my plan through to the end. Maria was unusually cheerful that morning, unaware of the storm brewing beneath my composed exterior. She spoke excitedly about the event, eager to see the performances and spend time with Jessica. I listened, nodding in all the right places, forcing myself to smile when necessary. Every word, every gesture was carefully controlled, a performance in itself. We arrived at the theater together, the place already buzzing with anticipation. The venue was stunning, just as I had envisioned it, glittering chandeliers casting a warm glow over the audience. The rich red velvet of the seats adding a touch of grandeur. The energy in the room was palpable, and I could see the excitement in Maria's eyes as she looked around, taking it all in. Jessica arrived shortly after us, her face lighting up when she saw Maria. They embraced warmly, and for a moment, I felt a pang of something almost like regret. But I quickly pushed it aside, reminding myself of why I was doing this. Their smiles, their laughter, soon, it would all be gone, replaced by the harsh reality of what they had done. The evening began as planned. The musicians I had carefully selected took the stage one by one, each performance more mesmerizing than the last. The audience was enraptured, their applause filling the theater after every set. Maria and Jessica sat together, completely absorbed in the music, their shared passion evident in the way they leaned in close, whispering to each other between songs. I kept my distance, watching from the wings, my heart pounding in time with the music. Everything was going according to plan. No one suspected a thing. To them, I was just another host, a lover of music bringing people together for a night of celebration. They had no idea that this night would end in anything but joy. As the final act drew to a close, I felt the tension in my chest tighten. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The lights dimmed, and the stage fell silent, the audience murmuring in anticipation of what was to come next. I stepped out from the shadows, making my way to the center of the stage. The spotlight found me, and for a brief second, the theater was plunged into complete silence. I could feel the eyes of every person in the room on me, but I focused on the two that mattered most, Maria and Jessica. Their smiles faltered when they saw me, a flicker of confusion crossing their faces. Maria tilted her head slightly as if trying to understand what was happening. Jessica remained still, her expression unreadable. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch a moment longer before I spoke. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady and clear. Music has always been a powerful force in my life. It can bring people together, to express emotions that words alone cannot capture. Tonight, we've all been witnesses to that power. I paused, letting my words sink in, watching Maria's confusion deepen. But music, I continued, my tone hardening, can also reveal truths that have been hidden, truths that are often difficult to face. I saw Jessica's eyes narrow slightly, a hint of apprehension creeping into her features. Maria reached out to touch her arm as if seeking reassurance. "I've always believed that honesty is the foundation of any relationship," I said, turning my gaze directly to Maria. "Without it, there is no trust, no love, only a hollow shell of what once was." The room was utterly silent now, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I could see Maria's face draining of color, her hand falling limply to her side as realization began to dawn. "This evening," I said, my voice growing stronger, "I wanted to share something personal, something that has been weighing on my heart for some time." I took another step forward, the spotlight following me as I closed the distance between myself and the audience. Maria and Jessica were both staring at me now, their expressions a mix of fear and confusion. "Maria," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper, "there's something I need to say, something that I think everyone here deserves to know." I saw Maria's lips part as if to speak, but no words came. Jessica's hand moved to her mouth, her eyes wide with dread. "Tonight," I continued, "is not just about music. It's about truth. It's about revealing what has been hidden in the shadows for far too long." I took one final breath, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. And then, with all the emotion I had been holding back, I delivered the words that would shatter the world they had built together. "Maria, Jessica," I said, my voice ringing out across the theater, "this night is for you. For your lies, your betrayal, and for the truth that will finally set us all free." The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, shocked expressions. all swirled around me as I stood there, the weight of what I had just done settling over me like a heavy cloak. Maria's face was a mask of horror, tears welling in her eyes as she realized what was happening. Jessica looked at her in disbelief, her shock mirrored in Maria's tear-filled gaze. And as the theater around me buzzed with confusion and disbelief, I felt a strange sense of release, of closure. I had done it. The truth was out, and there was no going back. This was the climax of our story, the final note in a symphony of betrayal and revenge. The music had played, the performance was over, and all that was left were the echoes of what once was. And I was finally free. The theater was engulfed in a suffocating silence, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I stood at the center of the stage, the spotlight casting a harsh glare as I looked out at the sea of stunned faces. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the finality of what I had just done. Maria and Jessica were frozen in their seats, their expressions a mirror of the chaos I had just unleashed. The shock on Maria's face was stark, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. I had never seen her look so vulnerable, so completely unguarded. The carefully crafted world she had built was crumbling before her eyes, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Jessica was no less affected. Her hand, which had been covering her mouth, slowly dropped to her lap, revealing an expression of utter disbelief. Her usually composed demeanor was shattered, replaced by raw, unfiltered emotion. The realization of what had just transpired was sinking in, and she looked to Maria, searching for some form of reassurance that wasn't there. "I want you all to know," I began again, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me, "that this is not just a story of infidelity. This is a story of betrayal, of trust broken in the most intimate way possible." The audience was deathly quiet, every eye fixed on the drama unfolding before them. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next blow to fall. I could see the confusion and discomfort on their faces, the way some shifted uneasily in their seats. And others leaned forward, captivated by the spectacle. "For weeks," I continued, my gaze now locked on Maria, "I've lived with the knowledge that the woman I loved more than anything in this world was no longer mine. I've watched as she drifted away, drawn into the arms of another, someone who was supposed to be a friend." Maria flinched at my words, a tear finally slipping down her cheek. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her eyes pleaded with me, silently begging for understanding, for forgiveness, but I had none to give. "Maria," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, "how could you do this to us? How could you take everything we built together and throw it away for, what? For a moment of passion? For someone who could never love you the way I did?" Jessica stiffened at this, her expression hardening as if bracing herself against the impact of my words. She finally found her voice, but it was shaky, uncertain. "John, please, this isn't the place?" "No, Jessica," I cut her off sharply, my tone leaving no room for argument. "This is exactly the place. Everyone here deserves to know the truth, about you, Maria, and the lies woven around us." I could see the disbelief turning into something else now, anger, shame, guilt. Jessica glanced around the room as if realizing for the first time that all these people, these witnesses to our downfall, were staring at her. The weight of their judgment was palpable, pressing down on her like a physical force. Maria buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as silent sobs racked her body. It was a sight that should have broken my heart, that should have made me want to comfort her, to take away her pain. But all I felt was a cold, empty void where my love for her used to be. The audience began to murmur, the tension in the room thickening as whispers spread through the crowd. I could hear snippets of conversation, shock, disbelief, pity. Some people looked at me with sympathy, others with a mixture of confusion and unease. But all eyes kept returning to Maria and Jessica, the two women who had been so intimately exposed. "This was never just about you, Maria," I said, my voice cutting through the growing noise. "This was about us, about what we had, what we were supposed to be. And now it's all gone." I turned my gaze to Jessica, who was staring at me with a mix of defiance and desperation. "And you, Jessica, you were supposed to be a friend. You were supposed to be someone we could trust. But instead, you became the catalyst for our destruction." Jessica's eyes flashed with something, anger, perhaps, or maybe just the realization that there was no way out of this now. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't done yet. "I want you both to know," I said, my voice steady and cold, "that this isn't just about what you did to me. It's about what you did to us, to the life we had, the life we could have had. You took it all away, and for what? A fleeting moment of desire? A connection that was never meant to be?" The room seemed to close in around us, the weight of my words pressing down on everyone present. I could feel the energy shifting, the judgment of the audience now fully focused on Maria and Jessica. They were exposed and vulnerable, and there was no escape. Maria finally looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes full of pain and regret. "John, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it was too late to apologize. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I had said what I needed to say, and now the truth was out, laid bare for all to see." I stepped back from the microphone, the noise of the audience growing louder as I did. I could see the confusion and discomfort on their faces, the way some were already beginning to rise from their seats, uncertain of what to do next. The night that had started as a celebration of music had ended in a public spectacle of betrayal and heartbreak. As I walked off the stage, leaving Maria and Jessica to face the consequences of their actions, I felt nothing but a cold, empty satisfaction. The truth had been revealed, and now, the final act of our story was over. The aftermath of the evening unfolded in a blur. The theater, once alive with the melodies of the performances, now echoed with the whispers of a shattered reality. The audience had dispersed, leaving behind a trail of murmurs and uneasy glances. I watched as the last of the guests filtered out, their faces reflecting the same shock and dismay that I had seen on Maria and Jessica. I lingered in the empty theater, the grandeur of the space now feeling hollow and alien. The stage lights had dimmed, the spotlight that had so harshly illuminated the truth now extinguished. The silence that followed was almost oppressive, a stark contrast to the lively buzz of the evening. I walked through the seats, the plush velvet beneath my fingers feeling oddly comforting. Every step I took seemed to reverberate with the weight of what I had done. I had orchestrated this night and planned every detail with meticulous care, and it had all culminated in a public display of betrayal. Now, in the quiet that followed, I was left alone with my thoughts. My emotions were a tangled mess: anger, sadness, relief, and emptiness. Anger at Maria and Jessica for their deception, for the way they had violated the trust that I had given them so freely. Sadness for the loss of what had once been, a life that had been filled with love and laughter, now reduced to a painful memory. Relief that the truth was finally out, that the facade had been shattered. And an emptiness that came from realizing that the life I had known was irretrievably changed. As I stood alone on the stage, I couldn't help but think about what would come next. What would happen to Maria and Jessica now? Would they confront the aftermath of their actions, or would they try to escape from it, as if it were a bad dream? And what about me? Where did I go from here? I had spent so much time focusing on the details of this night, on ensuring that the truth was revealed, that I hadn't given much thought to what would follow. The evening had been an act of catharsis, a way to confront the pain I had been feeling. But now that it was over, I faced the daunting task of moving forward, of finding a new path in the wreckage of my former life. I walked backstage, where the remnants of the evening's excitement lay scattered: empty water bottles, discarded programs, and the echoes of applause that now felt like a distant memory. The space was a stark reminder of the contrast between the night's celebration and the personal tragedy that had unfolded. I found myself standing in front of the mirror in the dressing room, staring at my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes tired, and the weight of the night was etched into every line. I looked at myself and wondered if I would ever be able to look at myself the same way again. The man who had orchestrated this event, who had taken such drastic measures, was now just a person grappling with the aftermath. The question of what would happen next lingered heavily in my mind. The future seemed uncertain, a blank slate waiting to be filled with new choices and new challenges. I knew that I couldn't undo what had been done, that the past was set in stone. But I also knew that I had to find a way to move forward, to rebuild, to find a new direction. I left the theater with a heavy heart, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was quiet, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. It felt oddly peaceful, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. As I walked away from the theater, I reflected on the evening's events, on the pain and the revelations that had come to light. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult and that healing and rebuilding would take time. But I also knew that I had taken a significant step in confronting the truth, in finding some form of resolution. The future was uncertain, and the path forward was unclear. But as I walked through the quiet streets, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. I had faced the truth, had taken control of my own story, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. The final curtain had fallen on one chapter of my life. And as I looked toward the horizon, I knew that it was time to begin a new act, one where I would write my future, free from the shadows of the past.